Morning, everybody, and welcome to this second episode of the Forest Talk webinar series. This second webinar will be about EU forest policy and pathways in a changing world. And I will be introducing you to the webinar. I am Fulvio Di Fulvio from the International Institute of Applied System Analysis, and I'm a co-coordinator of the Forest Navigator project, which is one of the three projects organizing this webinar series. The webinar series is organized together by Forest Navigator, ForestPaths, and PathFinder. And today we will have speakers from all the three projects and one external speaker join us and suggesting us some interesting findings for our pathways. This special episode is about EU forest policy and pathways in a changing world. So we will speak here about geopolitical changes and how this will affect the pathway modeling. Let's go through our agenda together. So I will give an introduction to you, and after I will hand over the webinar to my colleague from IASA, Peter Havlik, and he will give us an introduction and moderation of the speech of Sten Nilsson, which is our external speaker, and he will give us an overview on geopolitical changes and their potential impact on the forest sector and the modeling of our pathways. During this session, we'll also ask you to ask questions. So we'll have a Q&A session. This will be moderated by Peter. So you can place your questions in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window. And you can also like questions of each other. And then we will select the most liked question and ask them to Sten and discuss them together with Sten. After the presentation from Sten and this Q&A, we will have three presentations from the three different projects. We will start with a presentation on the visions from the ForestPaths project. This will be followed by a presentation on the socioeconomic drivers of our pathways from the PathFinder project. And then we'll have a presentation on the socioeconomic output of our pathway modeling, and this will be led by the Forest Navigator project. We will close this with a panel discussion, and this panel discussion will be on poll results, and the poll will be launched during the last presentation. It will be about the socioeconomic output from the three projects. So you will have opportunity to vote for the most interesting socioeconomic outputs that you will expect from our projects. And then we'll have a closing of the webinar. And you can also place your comments in the chat, and we will try to reply also in the chat to your comments during the webinar. I will start now with a short introduction about the modeling of policy pathways in our projects. I would like to remind you what is the overall aim of these three projects together, which is to end this webinar series. The aim of the three projects is to design policy pathways for European forests supporting climate, biodiversity, and bioeconomy goals. And during this webinar series, we'd like to show you how the projects provide the scientific foundation of future forest policy pathways. So what we would like to do is to increase also your thought into our policy pathways. And to do this, we created this webinar series where we try to increase your stakeholder view integration in our work. So we are all three projects together trying to develop complementary policy pathways, and we are using different also modeling platform for doing that. And all of this is trying to maximize the contribution of forests towards climate neutrality, biodiversity, and bioeconomy goals through the identification of win-win-win forest management strategies and also wood uses in the bioeconomy. We try to integrate from one side the monitoring of the forest from different sources together with the forest management options, but also wood uses in the bioeconomy. And we try to look also at the different interactions with biodiversity and with climate change, considering also how biodiversity can increase the resilience of our forests. And of course, we also have a strong stakeholder interaction with this webinar series, but also another series of events like workshop together with the stakeholders where we try to co-design our solutions. To understand more of this concept of the pathways, we need to start to look at the forest sector, policy pathway, and what is the underneath concepts. First of all, we need to think about goals. And what is a common goal across the three projects is to maximize the EU forest sector contribution to EU climate neutrality by 2050. And we have visions. And the vision is to achieve the climate neutrality goal while maximizing synergies between forest sector contribution to climate, biodiversity, and the bioeconomy. Once we have a goal and we have a vision, then we can design a pathway to achieve our goal, considering our vision. And the pathway is then the roadmap, which outlines the sequence of steps and policy actions which are required to realize the vision and achieve ultimately the goal. At EU level, we have already a pathway for all the different economic sectors going towards climate neutrality, as is a decarbonization pathway. And we know that in this decarbonization pathway, we have a LULUCF sector, which play a role in compensating the emission from all other sectors. And by 2050, this sector should compensate the remaining emissions from the others. In particular, the forest sector is very relevant because within this LULUCF is the one providing the largest sink and is expected to play a key role in this decarbonization. However, we are now in a situation where we can observe that recently there's been a decline in the forest sector sink, and we have still a goal of increasing the contribution from this sector. At the same time, we'd like also to increase the sector contribution to conserve biodiversity and sustaining the growth of the bioeconomy. So we are in a very complex dilemma. So how we can design these future pathways? First of all, we need to model and understand alternative socioeconomic developments and alternative managements and wood uses. This is done through, first of all, exploratory scenario and cases, where we look at these different alternatives. As an example, you have an exploratory scenario case 1, where we try to change management in the forest, or we try to increase the conservation or restoration ambition, or you will have an exploratory case 2, where you see increasing the lifetime of harvested wood products or the other type of solution. And we will formulate a series of these alternative scenarios, cases, and including different options, both in the management and the bioeconomy. And once we have all these cases, we will model them and understand how the different cases will deliver in the future. And then we will combine the most promising options together to design the pathway. So we will combine the most promising results in a policy pathway, which describes the action and the timing to achieve our goal. And this will be our forest sector policy pathway to climate neutrality. And each project will try to do this, and we will look into synergies together. Now that we have another issue. We have really recently, we are experiencing significant geopolitical changes, which are affecting how the EU and the rest of the world will evolve, especially in terms of socioeconomic drivers. And we need to understand better which type of threats and opportunities are emerging from these changes. And now we can capture these changes in our pathways. That's why we will start now with an overview of these changes together with our external speaker, Sten Nilsson. And I will give now the floor to my colleague from IASA, Peter Havlik, and he will be moderating the discussion with Stan. And Peter Havlik is program director at the International Institute of Applied System Analysis, and is together with me the co-coordinator of the Forest Navigator project. Please, Peter, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fulvio, and most importantly, thanks a lot to Professor Nilsson, who accepted to give this important keynote speech to our webinar here. A few words for introduction. Professor Nilsson, for those who don't know him yet, which I think will be the minority here, has earned his reputation as a world-leading forestry researcher. His groundbreaking studies have advanced our understanding of sustainable forest management, climate change mitigation, and ecological conservation. Professor Nilsson's work has had a profound influence on forest policies worldwide, shaping the frameworks used to address some of the most pressing environmental issues of our time. Over his career, Professor Nilsson has authored and co-authored some 400 scientific publications, which earned him also the membership of the Royal Swedish Academy of Agriculture and Forestry, but he was also appointed, for example, as academician of the UN International Academy on Informatics in Russia and as a foreign member of the Lithuanian Academy of Sciences. Professor Nilsson is frequently asked to address international meetings and organizations on different issues dealing with the forest sector, including his support to the World Bank, FAO, OECD, European Commission, and others. Professor Nilsson served also as an expert in different international organizations such as the World Commission on Forests and Sustainable Development, International Boreal Forest Research Association, and many others. Recently, Professor Nilsson has been, for his achievements, awarded the Marcus Wallenberg Prize. This was in 2023. This prize is awarded for great achievements for research related to the forest industry. And I have to say that it was my great privilege to learn Sten Nilsson as my first boss when I joined IASA in 2007, where he was already since the early 90s leading the IASA forestry program, which he did afterwards for the next 20 years. In this capacity, Professor Nilsson became the first IASA scientist to initiate comprehensive research on Russian and Siberian forestry, a pioneering endeavor which until now is earning several high-level publications per year and important scientific insights. After his retirement from IASA, Professor Nilsson serves as independent advisor to industry, governments, and environmental organizations on mainly transformation of the forest sector to a bioindustry and on transformation to a green economy. Stan, thank you again for accepting our invitation, and we are very much looking forward to your talk. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Peter, and good morning to everybody. There are at least two missions impossible with this presentation. Speaking about the geopolitical changes, we are not only looking at the world which is the world order is changing. We are having a world in disorder currently. And the second mission impossible is to deal with this fully in 20 minutes. So this will be a snapshot, and I hope you can accept that. The I'm starting with discussing the geopolitical trends before the Trump 2 administration came into office. And the big picture is that we have wars in Ukraine, in Middle East and Africa, which is disturbing the world order. The conflicts between US, China, and Russia and EU is suffering from this. And what is the origin for these conflicts is the competition for commodities, and also to be a leader in the AI development. The most disturbing part is the democratic backsliding. Nowadays, over 70% of the world population is living in autocracies, and it was 50% 2004. And I have big doubts that we, in the current situation, can call United States for a democracy. And all this is following a number of developments which are rather ugly and difficult to deal with. We are getting an increased polarization and regionalization. It's nationalism, protectionism, and political divisions in the world. The global trade is facing an anti-globalization and protectionism. We have a weakening global cooperation. There is less commitment to international agreements, and the international organizations are getting weaker. With respect to forestry, I think both the UN as a head organization, the FAO, the World Bank, Forest Europe, for example, they have lost their leadership in the development of the forest sector. We have regional power shifts. China and Russia are exploiting developing countries, especially in Africa. We have increased division between the global south and the global north. We see an extended BRICS growing, and I don't think it will be important from an economic point of view, but it will be important from the point of view that they are, all of them, looking for less Westerness, or the Western view on how we are living. We had also before Trump 2 severe climate change impacts on the forest ecosystems, and it has been increasing rather dramatically. And from a policy point of view, we have been dealing with it in a two-way track. The first one is to reduce the emissions, the mitigations, mainly through technical solutions. And the other one is, of course, to adapt to the climate change. We have done less on the adaptation, and I think there's a lot much more to do there in order to keep up with development. What we have seen is that we have had a rapid increase of the extreme rights, political rights, and that is threatening the climate policies. The EU Green Deal is very fragile, and some are arguing that it's dead. And we are also seeing that many of the flagship green projects have been failing, both from an economic point of view and that there hasn't been a market. And it looks like a lot of things have been overestimated, what you could do with these new technologies, and the politicians have been running with it. We can see that we have changes in the forest sector. There is an increased pressure on the forest resources globally, mainly from a food point of view and infrastructure. And the infrastructure is occupying agricultural land, and in order to compensate for that, you have increased deforestation. And we're also seeing, which is important in this game, there is a change in the industry location. We have a shift from the global north to the global south. So the left bars there is that we can see the dramatic increase during 20 years in the pulp production in Latin America, and a decreasing production in North America and Europe. With respect to paper and board, it's driven by the demand, and it's happening in China or in Southeast Asia and Asia in general, and it's decreasing rather strongly both in North America and in Europe. We are seeing that the fast-growing plantations for production of industrial wood is growing, not everywhere. I think that the NGOs are not helping in this development. They are having a lot of opposition against this development. There's a recent study showing that we can increase the fast-growing plantations with some 10 million hectares quite easily in Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, China, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, India, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Chile, plus some others. And I think it's important that that is happening. The reason for this development is the material transformation, and it's dealing with a fiber mixture. So we can see during the last 20 years, we have doubled the use of hardwood, and that means mainly eucalypts, in the fiber mixes of the paper and board production. And the softwood is rather stable. And this trend is continuing. And we can see that in Latin America during the 2020s, there will come along 20 million tons of hardwood pulp production. And the issue is that they are building new big machines, and in Asia we are building the paper machines, and it's also big machines. So the capacity coming along in Latin America, we have mills with one production line having a capacity of 2.5 to 3.5 million tons, which can be compared with the Swedish biggest pulp producer or market pulp, having 3 mills producing 2 million tons. What we also expected before Trump 2 was that Russia was going to be banned for a long time with trading with Russia, and that has, of course, maybe changed. So now we are seeing the 4 sector trends after Trump 2 came into office. There are a number of open questions. There is the climate and biodiversity and environmental issue. US has pulled out of the Paris Agreement. They are pulling out of IPCC. They are stopping research programs dealing with global change, climate, biodiversity, sustainability, environment, green buildings, etc. And that will, of course, have an effect on at the global level. We can see an impact on the industrial production of trade. It's highly probable that they will drop the logging bans on the West Coast and Alaska, plus in the state forest. We will see trade tariffs coming in, 25% for some countries. And so as it sits today, it will be effective 2nd of April. Excuse me. And we can maybe expect a trade war for forest products. It looks like the US will give forgiveness to Russia and dropping the trading bans on forest products and start to do business with them again. And by the Trump administration pulling back from a number of international activities, they are opening up for China to get control of more and more of the global trade of forest products. So the Belt and Road Initiative, the Chinese new Silk Road system, is controlling 30% of the world's trade of forest products today, and that is bound to increase in this situation. And if Trump is continuing as he's doing, the US will drop control of 169 harbors in the world, and as soon as we are doing that, China will move in. So what can EU do in this situation? There is a common view that the EU is at a crossroad, that the EU is behind and is in a very bad shape, and that the Green Deal is perceived to be a dead piece of work. But there is really a green transition happening. Maybe not at the scale and speed and with the very big flagships we thought earlier, but it is underway. And there are also some industrial leaders are saying that we shouldn't pull out of this direction. We must continue to work with a transition. And the reason is that we will be behind China from a technical point of view. China is leading many of the technical developments and also to some extent in the AI development. So I'm keen to say that there are opportunities for reforms in the European Union. And there we have a lot of positive things we should be aware of with respect to Europe. We are a world leader in some of the green technologies, but we haven't brought it into production, or we haven't scaled it up. We have a common market, which is important. We have the democracy, which none of the other big players have. We have a sustainability concept, which none of the other have. And so far, we have a unity in Europe. And it's a lot of discussion that Europe is behind in AI and in semiconductors. Yeah, from a volume point of view, but we have a lot of pockets with very exclusive and important AI development in different places in Europe. And the same about the semiconductors. The semiconductors we are producing in the EU are different from what the rest of the world is producing. Also, the situation in the US will maybe lead to a situation where we can attract the brains from the United States to work in a different environment. As Fulvio said in his introduction, you are working with the climate, biodiversity, and the bioeconomy. And I will try to bring up some aspects of that, and I will start with the climate. I think that the forest carbon will probably not play that heavy weight in the politics in the future in the EU. And why is it so? One is the extreme right-wing expansion, but we're also having new scientific insights on the biogenic and geological carbon sources and sinks. The forest growth has been declining, and the politicians are starting to realize the risks and practical challenges with the sinks of forest and forest products. And by the way, at the time at YASA, we were stressing the uncertainties with the zinc calculations, and nobody was listening to us, but now it sounds like it's sinking in. And EU has underperformed with respect to the forest sinks in relation to what was expected. A very important part and difficult and complicated is that the EU's emission trading scheme will make over time the substitution effect in the calculations will disappear. If I go to the biodiversity, it is a mind-boggling, complex issue. You have to deal with spatial scales from a part of a tree or a plant up to the large-scale landscapes. On the temporal scale, you have to go back to the historical development of what we have now and look at the rotation period ahead. You have to look into the interaction between underground and above ground processes. And it's much more complicated than most people think. The climate and biodiversity are strongly interlinked. And the dominating policy conflict between forest management is between forest management and conservation. But it's important to remember that a strong sustainable forest management, we need less of reserves. But if we have a weak sustainable forest management, we have a strong need of reserves. Of course, we need to have reserves, but I'm not a friend of saying we need to put aside 30% of the land. I think we should put aside what we need to do from how serious point of view, how severe is the conditions, and not a flat rate percentage. So if I look at climate and biodiversity together, I think the policies should integrate climate and biodiversity. And the key issue is to build resilient forest ecosystems. And in order to do that, we have to aim for precision forestry. That's the only way forward. And how do we do that? I think the simple rule is to create as diverse forest in as many dimensions as possible. And in order to do that, we need detailed data. Therefore, I'm really astonished by the opposition we see against the European Forest Monitoring Law. And I think it's very short-sighted. We need that information. The third component is the bioeconomy. And that is a way to link the social, economic, and environmental aspects within the forest sector. But the problems are that with the bioeconomy, we have discussed it for 25 years, and not that much has happened. I have to apologize. I don't know what I have got in my throat. Still, it's only a minor percentage of the company's revenue, which is really dealing with new economy products. The sector continues to focus on more of the same as we have produced earlier, instead of looking into breakthrough innovations. The strategy is that we should continue to do and expand on what we are good to do, what we are good at today. We are world leaders in basic research of using the fiber for new products, but we are not very good at bring this to the market and scale up the innovations. So the way is that we have to go beyond the traditional forest sector. We have to look into synergies between cross-sectoral approaches, and we have to go into really to sustainable circular models and a much more efficient fiber use. And we need stronger policy efforts for the market introduction and scaling up the production. I will look into a couple of examples where I think it's important to go forward. There is a lot of discussions about biogenic carbon capture and sequestration, but most of the discussion is about collecting it and pipe it down in old mines or oil wells. And I think it's a stupid way. It's uncertain and it's expensive. The CO2, the captured CO2 is an excellent raw material, and we can produce a lot of materials out of it. And that is the way we should go. We have had a lot of discussions about the biochemicals, and there is an opportunity. So far, we have only used the side streams or the by streams in the pulp and paper industry for the chemical production. Still, the conventional pulp has been the main target. But now we are seeing trends, and this is UPM's mill in Leuna in Germany, where the primary use of wood is to produce biochemicals. So it's a completely shift in thinking, and I think we have to expand on this way of looking into things. There are big opportunities to look into other technologies. Combining artificial intelligence, 3D printing, lignin from glue, or glue from lignin where you are just using water, and using for the 3D printing. And this is an example where you're using wood waste. And I have seen dining room tables, big ones in Japan, using this technology, and the price is about $20,000. So you can really generate value added by this. We have in the sector had a lot of campaigns, as long as I can remember, about building in wood, but not much has happened because it's a complex way to change the sector, the building sector. You need to have the architects on the side, you need to have the city planners, you need to have the constructors, you need to have the financial industry with you, you need to have the politicians, and you need to have the land explorers with you. And we are not working efficiently enough with that, and therefore not much is happening. And the free market economy is not helping. We have seen that housing has, to a large extent, been a way to increase your fortunes. And the government has withdrawn from public housing, or what you call it for social housing, and that is not helping the situation. We have the issue of the mass timber construction, which has gained a lot of attention, and a lot has been happening. But we should remember that that is consuming an awful lot of wood, and we may have strained wood supply to really expand on the mass timber construction. And we are facing the situation that the mechanical wood industry is undervalued by the financial industry, but we have also potentials to further develop it by artificial intelligence and 3D innovations. And it's still that the pulp and paper industry is the strongest. It's dominating the forest policy, and that is limiting the investments in mass wood construction. There is an opportunity to expand if we go into hard deciduous species and using those in the production. And I think we also, in certain parts of Europe, should change our direction, where we have priorities on producing pulpwood to produce sawnwood instead, or sawlogs. And there will be a lot of advantages of that, better economic return to the forest owner. We will increase the sustainability, we will have a higher biodiversity, better climate impacts. So the future of forest policies, I think it's very important to set the US forest policy in a global perspective, given what's happening on the geopolitical arena. We can't handle the forest policies for Europe in isolation from what's happening in the rest of the world. I think it's strongly important to integrate the forest industrial policies with the forest policies. Today, they are regarded as two independent sectors, but in reality, they can't live without each other. So we need a holistic approach. And as I have illustrated, the conventional forest industry will over time move to the global south. So we have to prepare, and it's an incitement to develop the sector for more value-added products and bioeconomics. I think it's crucial to deal with or develop the industrial use of hardwoods, deciduous species. I think science must change. We are dealing with very complex systems, and we have to more and more deal with storytelling. What does it mean with the policies concretely for the public in general? What does it mean for me that we are changing the policies. I attended a seminar with politicians a couple of weeks ago and with scientists, and the scientists said year 2100, the average pH value in the world's oceans will have decreased from 8.1 to 7.7. That is the largest change which has happened during 50 million years. And representatives from the politicians, they had no idea what does this mean. And the public, they have no feeling for the pH value change. And 50 million years, it's an incredible high number. So there is a lot lost in the translation between the science part and to the people who really are going to need to change. And the recent research is showing that the political rhetoric on these issues is just frightening the public. So we need something completely different. And therefore, it's important to remind you that forestry is not about trees, it's about people. Thank you very much, and I apologize for my my voice, that is not as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nielsen, for this truly inspiring speech. I think that you managed at least two big challenges to deal with them. One, to find some signs of hope and some directions how we could deal in a positive way with all these new challenges which we did not consider when we were writing the proposal for all these three projects. And given the size of the topic, you did also great with the time. Thank you very much. I think that especially this message which you gave to us on the last slide, that we have to integrate the industrial with the forest policies, is something which we should thoroughly explore in the remainder time which is left for these projects. And also I felt very inspired by your comment that we have the technologies, we have the innovation, but we are lacking the scaling up, and maybe that's a role for the type of science which we are also doing in our projects, where we could demonstrate the benefits of scaling up these technologies, which hopefully could lead to their widespread kind of development. In the meantime, we collected a few questions. I would probably merge the first two, which are on the EU forest monitoring law. So Anne-Marie Bastrup-Berg from the European Environment Agency is asking you, could you please elaborate your views on why it is short-sighted to be against the proposed EU forest monitoring law? And then maybe a complementary question to this from an anonymous attendee. What is the type of information that we need from the forest monitoring law? Satellite information on resources, or also socio-economic information on the people and societies managing the forests, and so on? Professor Nielsen, please.
Thank you. As I said, the way forward is to go into precision forestry, and that is data intensive. And I will not list the parameters we need, but there are tremendous opportunities with the satellite technique combined with artificial intelligence to develop the data collection. And I think it is short-sighted by the member states not to use common EU approach, because it's very expensive for each country to develop this kind of technologies. But with an EU concept, you can get the union to support that development. So I think in the long term, it will help the member states to develop their own national inventories. So I think there are important issues on the green side, but we also have to collect information, which we can't do with a monitoring law, on the social aspects. What does it mean for the people? Where are the conflicts? And that has to be a side or an additional activity to the more green data collection.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have collected several other questions, but I think because of the time, I will have to pick last one. And Professor Nielsen, if you were available to answer maybe in the chat the other questions during the rest of the seminar. So I would take this one. On the further development of an advanced climate neutral bioeconomy, what would be your top 3 concrete advices for EU policymakers on how to best further this objective compared to the current policy state of play?
Yeah, it's connected to really pick up the innovations, because we have a lot of innovations at a basic level, and drive them to the market, help to drive to the market side, so we can scale it up, so we get the economy we need of those new technologies. I think that is where the union has an important role to play.
Okay, thank you very much. With this again, also for the great talk, and also all the participants who provided their questions and interest in this. And we hope you can stay with us until the end, where we hopefully will return back in a panel discussion.
Yeah,
thank you again.
I am here.
Thank you very much. And now I think I can hand over back to Fulvio.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much, Stan. Now we will move to the 3 projects presentation, with the first one from Mirko Peltoniemi. He is professor at Luke in Finland, and will present on behalf of the ForestPaths projects on the visions which are co-created with the stakeholders in the project, and how these are translated into scenarios and cases, and then options. Please, Mikko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fulvio. So as Fulvio told, I'm going to tell about ForestPaths stakeholder work and development of policy pathways for the forest sector of Europe. And one like essential part of that is creating visions for the forest sector. So the stakeholders are in central role in this process, and we have been organizing a series of policy labs aiming at creating these visions, and later also the policy pathways for Europe. They all target at reaching EU's climate goals, but they could do that in very different ways depending on how the future is seen by the stakeholders in different visions. So after presenting these visions, I'm going to tell how our exploratory scenario work will serve the development of final policy pathways. So in the past 2 policy labs, our stakeholders created three alternative visions for the EU's forest sector, and we take them as input for the further development of policy pathways. How they will be exactly implemented in the policy pathways hasn't been exactly decided yet because the work is still ongoing. So if we take a look at the main features of the visions, we see that they represent quite different views of the desired development of the forest sector. The first one, people, planet, profit vision, resembles like a classic bioeconomy vision where production and technology are essential components. The second one, the better forests for all, sees forests serving multiple purposes. Decreases of production are also anticipated, but having more forests compensates it. The last vision focuses on the traditions and culture and bringing forests close to people in Europe. So if we take a slightly closer look at the main differences, we notice that the first one, the people, planet, profit, sees forest production important, and it's also important component for the mitigation. Land that's good for production should be also maintained in production. Diversity is also important, but mainly for adaptation and supporting forestry in the long term. The vision Better Forests for All has strongest view on climate and biodiversity goals. Landscape everywhere should offer these and other ecosystem services. Forestry should also be motivating and a source of income through multiple different ecosystem services. The last one of our visions sees forest clearly different. Cultural aspects and human-nature relationship are appreciated. Biodiversity elements should penetrate everywhere. Wood is also seen valuable, and small-scale forestry should also have room. These visions have also much in common. All mentioned sustainable use of wood, long-lived wood products. Diversity is also considered in every vision, but what it really means may differ by the action. So this was about our visioning work so far, but ForestPaths also investigates the impacts of individual mitigation options, which we call exploratory cases. So usefulness of these options will be evaluated based on their impact on mitigation, wood production, biodiversity, and different land use trade-offs, particularly for the agricultural production. Yes, there's some elements missing. So in the second stage, we will combine the knowledge of the impacts of promising exploratory cases to the visions that were created by the stakeholders. That will be done also by the stakeholders who will combine different exploratory cases to the visions and continue developing the policy pathway, which will define the eventual time-dependent steps required for reaching the EU's goals. So if we take a look at the different options that we are, or different exploratory cases we are testing, the first set of cases considers actions and options that involve land use change somehow, meaning mainly protection, restoration, and afforestation actions. They lead to supply-driven changes in forest production. Two of those, particularly the protection and restoration, could be powerful mitigation options in the short term and really help reaching EU's climate goals, but they have also negative impacts for the bioeconomy, and they might also have negative impacts on the mitigation later in the century. So these will be evaluated with models explicitly, considering and integrating simulations of different land uses and economy. So the second set of cases considers different forest management options and their impacts on forest-based mitigation, structure, and diversity. These cases are forced changes in management practices of forest as of 2025. They will lead to lead to supply-driven changes in forest growth and structure, and the impacts will be evaluated with forest-oriented models participating in our project. The third set of cases considers different options for wood use, meaning how the product lifetimes and substitution possibilities affect the mitigation, and how the impacts of timber demand affect the mitigation possibilities in the forests. These impacts will be evaluated with forest sector modeling combined with life cycle analysis. So all in all, giving stakeholders information about promising mitigation options, they are then better prepared for the co-creation of these policy pathways. We will continue this co-creation work in our third policy lab that is due autumn this year. And hopefully we will get far with the development of policy pathways. So I will leave it to here. Thanks a lot for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mikko, for your presentation. Now we will move to the second presentation from the projects. This is from the PathFinder project, and it's from Daniel Di Marzo. He's a researcher at the Albert Ludwigs University of Freiburg. He will present us about the socioeconomic drivers of our policy pathways with an overview compiled together by the three projects. Please, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fulvio. And please apologize, there might be some overlap with Professor Nielsen's presentation, but hopefully we cover it and incorporate it quite well. So of course, talking about forests, they are, of course, a central component of Europe's transition toward the climate neutral and sustainable future. However, this transition doesn't happen in isolation. A range of exogenous factors must be considered when developing our models, ensuring that the policy pathways we develop with stakeholders are realistic and useful for policymakers. So across the three projects, we asked which of these exogenous socioeconomic drivers are most relevant in shaping the future EU forest policy pathways, and then furthermore, of these factors, which can be integrated into our models. So we considered three major categories of socioeconomic drivers that directly impact EU forest management, and the first one is global socioeconomic developments and international policies, which was heavily mentioned also in Professor Nielsen's presentation. But nonetheless, we identified four key components. So first of all, economic growth and population trends. A growing economy and an increasing population means rising demand for wood-based products, but at the same time, economic downturns could reduce demand and shift trade dynamics. Secondly, we highlight global trade dynamics. The EU's position in global wood markets is influenced by trade barriers, tariffs, import-export policies. I don't need to go into this very much because it was well covered by Professor Nielsen, but also the EU deforestation regulation as well, which restricts import linked to deforestation, can also shift market supply chains. The dynamics of the energy sector, also with green energy, bioenergy, is becoming a critical alternative to fossil fuels. However, how forests are used for energy production, competing with other clean and not so clean energy sources, raises important considerations. And then lastly, of course, the global biodiversity commitments, initiatives like the 3030 policy, which aim to protect 30% of global land and ocean areas, could restrict forest exploitation, influencing land use conservation efforts and forestry economics and management. So all of these global developments set the stage for how EU's internal markets respond. And here within the EU, evolving consumer preferences, technological innovations, and sustainable goals are changing how forests are managed. Firstly, we identify the bioenergy and market-based demand shifts. This is part of the EU's Green Deal, which is increasing the demand of wood-based alternatives in construction, bioplastics, and textiles, to name a few. This shift could boost the forestry sector, but also create competition for raw materials. Another factor is the circular economy and wood use, which we hope as Professor Nielsen would be increasing in the next years, would increase recycling and extend the lifespan of wood products. Policies supporting circularity will also affect production and consumption patterns. Technological innovations in wood processing. So these emerging technologies are making wood stronger, more versatile, and competitive against traditional materials. These innovations, if scaled up, could lead to new markets and economic opportunities for the wood-based sector. And then lastly, consumer behavior and economic incentives. So here we see three kind of broader questions. Are consumers willing to pay more for sustainable products? Will industries adapt to carbon pricing mechanisms? And could taxes on deforestation push companies to change their sourcing strategies? So then these factors directly shape the economics forest sector within Europe, which leads then to the supply side. And the supply side factors determine how wood is available, how it is sourced, and at what cost. So importantly, we recognize climate change and natural disturbances, acknowledging the increased frequency of fires, droughts, storms, and bark beetles, to name a few, that are direct or indirect externalities of climate change. These events threaten wood supply and forest health. The EU's environmental regulation, such as the Natural Restoration Law, aims to restore degraded ecosystems. This will have long-term effects on forestry management and policy. And finally, financial mechanisms supporting the forest sector. The EU provides subsidies for reforestation, carbon storage, and ecosystem services. The payments for ecosystem service ensure forests are valued not just for wood production, but also for cultural, recreational, and their climate benefits. So all in all, these factors mentioned above, or drivers, economic, regulatory, environmental, cultural, and technological, combine to shape the future of EU forest sector. By understanding these drivers, we can hope to design policy pathways for stakeholders and policymakers that are robust, forward-looking, and adaptable to different future EU forest scenarios. And now I pass it on to the next presenter.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your very informative overview. And now we will move to the last presentation from the three projects. And this is from Dr. William van Zijt from the Wageningen University Research. He will present on behalf of the Forest Navigator project. First of all, he will provide us an overview on the socioeconomic outputs from the three projects, so which potential outputs can be expected. And then he will show us an example of scenarios where are modeled some of the socioeconomic indicators with some very preliminary results. Please, William, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. I hope you all can hear me. Good afternoon. Yeah, so there's going to be, again, a little bit of an overlap with the previous talks, because also I'm going to showcase a little bit what kind of outputs we are going to look at. But then, of course, because we have got these complex models, sometimes the driver for one model will be the output for the other model. So there will be a bit of an overlap. But in general, just starting from the big picture, so we want to look at the contribution of the forest sector to the EU economy. So we can look at the future pathways and how this will affect the value added of the forest sector, but also the employment situation. And of course, this was also quite clear in Dr. Nielsen's presentation, the position and the competitiveness of the EU forest sector within the global situation is, of course, developing, and we'd like to shed some light on that by looking also at changes in trade and in the international economy, the production volumes of the EU versus the rest of the world, for example. Then, of course, we want to dive a bit deeper into the output related to the EU markets, and very basically, we then start looking at the production volumes and prices and things like that of the forest sector, but also, as mentioned earlier, the circular economy status and how we can model outputs for that. Disturbances, extreme events, things were also already mentioned by Daniel, so there's an overlap there in the outputs as well that we want to see, of course, and hopefully within the whole mitigation, conservation parts of the pathways, we can look into the competition with agriculture, but also the costs that are related with that. Finally, and I'm going through this relatively quickly, we also all projects are also looking at the ecosystem services and the values that they provide, and we have various outputs across the different projects that relate to this, and then of course both the combination of the carbon sequestration type of values, but also the cultural, recreational, and landscape values there. Now, this was a bit of a quick overview, but we did want to ask everybody here for feedback in a poll to give us your opinion and contributions on what your opinion on what the important aspects are of the forest sector to contribute to the EU economy and prosperity. I think there should be a poll popping up right now. I think I see it's happening. Yes. So I'll continue with my talk just to give an overview of the specific model results. But in the meanwhile, you can still look at this poll, and we'll come back to that after my brief talk. And then hopefully what I'm going to show will inspire you to perhaps also fill in the open-ended question at the end with things that we might have missed when it comes to the 4 answers that are available there. Okay, so I'm going to showcase a little bit of this is quite exploratory, so I want to make sure that these are not definitive scenarios yet, but this is just a showcase of the kind of output that we can provide, and specifically on the global macroeconomic assessments that we do with the so-called magnet model, this model that we employ at Wageningen Social and Economic Research. And this is a global general equilibrium model, but with a focus on agriculture and bioeconomy. And especially within the Forest Navigator project, we're adding quite a bit of details on the forest sectors there. Magnet is a bit particular in that it's always a global model. So you'll see on the left-hand side here the regional setup that we have for the current scenarios that we see with, you see quite some details here on the member state focus, but then the rest of the world is a little bit more aggregated. And just to give an idea of the type of drivers, at least in the magnet model for the core baseline setup, so a typical scenario till 2050 has mostly the GDP and the population and then employment as drivers. And that's basically the only thing that gets thrown to the model besides some scenario IDs. And then we have projections of global trade and production volumes and things like that coming out of the model based on the current dynamics. And then, sorry, I was going a bit faster. So we're looking here at a combination scenario that's a bit stylized, but that was majorly showcased to showcase the increased wood demand scenarios. I want to come back later, perhaps briefly. We also are looking into scenarios with more high circularity and more recycling and things like that. That would perhaps not necessitate an increase of wood demand, but for now, just for the showcase, I'm looking at scenarios with quite focus on increasing wood demand. And one lever is there, the increased lumber use in the construction sector, which was already talked about by Dr. Nielsen as well. And this more innovative use of wood or pulp, usually in the wood-based textiles. And then just in general increase of bioenergy based on wood pellets. And then I combine this in the graphs that I'll show just quickly as a total high bioeconomy scenario. And you'll see here the wood-based quantities that then come out of the model when we implement these kind of scenarios. And this is work that's been developed within the Forest Navigator project to really try to make the global macroeconomic model a bit more aware of the quantity-based forest quantities. So one thing is that this construction sector increases then the industrial roundwood demand quite a bit. And you'll see here on the right-hand side over in the graphs, of course, this increase of the roundwood volume demand and the amount that's produced by the European forests in the different scenarios. And you see that in the baseline, we already project a decent increase, but it becomes even higher in this scenarios of increased wood demand. And what we'll see in our particular implementation, this wood-based textile quantities are relatively small in the start, so they have a relatively limited impact, but the bigger impacts are from the bioenergy and from this construction sector increased demand. So when we can then dive into a little bit more is the, for example, the value added of these three sectors. And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it here, but these are the primary forestry sectors, the paper and pulp sectors, and the wood product sector. And you see that in the baseline situation, it increases, the value added increases from 2017, which is our base data, to 2050. And in the high bioeconomy scenario, it increases even more. But then if you look at the value added contribution to the GDP, you see that by 2050, that actually decreases over time. And this because of the general macroeconomic dynamics that the services sector will increase more, for example, things like that. So you'll see that still, even in the higher bioeconomy scenario, there is a decrease in relative contribution to the economy compared to the now, but at least it's mitigated a bit relative to the normal situation. What I'm not showing here is all the interaction with other sectors, but I'll leave that for another time, or we can I can refer to some of the deliverables that we're working on in case you're interested in that. I think I need to go a little bit faster, but just as an indication of what kind of outputs we can show here is that, of course, we have the primary production is increasing, and in Magnet we express everything in million US dollars. So you see that the production in the EU goes up quite a bit. But we do see that in this particular scenario, we kind of assume that the EU will be able to catch most of that production. But so the intra-trade in the EU is going up quite a bit. And then the general exports are still increasing over time, also in the baseline and also in this high bioeconomy scenario. Some final graphs is that we can look at the employment dynamics, so to say. So you see the left-hand side is the firm labor demand in dollars, and then the middle one is the actual workers employed. And you see that in the baseline scenario, you see the dotted line here is just the wood product sector, and then the solid line is the primary forestry sector. And you see in the baseline scenarios, employment is projected to go down, and that's mostly to do with increasing labor productivity. And you do see that the value added per worker is still steadily increasing over time, which also indicates rising wages and rising labor productivity. What you then see is that, for example, at least in the high bioeconomy scenarios, the total employment actually stabilizes somewhat over time. And this was going to be, so just summarizing. So I just wanted to share some socioeconomic indicators under different, like these high wood demand scenarios. Of course, what we haven't done here really is so one thing we haven't looked at too much in detail in this presentation is the connection with the high recycling scenarios, for example. Of course, so we of course want to look at quite some more scenarios, and then more detailed indicators to look at, like the bilateral trade patterns and things like that. But I think it's good that you stopped me, because I think I was getting near to my limit in any case. So I'll see there, and then perhaps we'll have some interesting poll results to look at. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, William, for your overview and your early results. And now we'll move back to Peter and to comment together with the Stan on the results of the poll. Please, can we see the results from the poll? And you have still some moments to vote, to cast your vote in the poll.
Anyway, in the meantime, the question was, how relevant are the following contributions from the forest sector to EU prosperity by 2050? And the options were either a cheap decarbonization through wood-based products, which could potentially relieve the pressure for decarbonization in other sectors. Then the regional GDP increase from forestry and wood-based industries. Then employment opportunities in forestry and wood industries. And finally, economic growth and employment from cultural and recreational activities. So I think the answers are quite balanced. So far, 25 of the 67 participants participated in the poll. And the highest ranked is the first option, a source of cheap decarbonization through wood-based products. So maybe Professor Nilsson, as we have last few minutes, I would take this last part with you again, if I may, because we have seen also in some of the other questions the kind of questioning of the carbon sequestration in the forest versus the mobilization and potentially storage of the carbon in the wood-based products. Do you see any space for complementarity for mobilizing additional biomass from the forest without reducing the carbon sequestration, or maybe on the other hand, given the risks to which the forests are exposed, is it actually even a safer way how to store the carbon in the products rather than in the forests directly? Do you have any thoughts about this? And maybe about the question in general. And you are muted.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I have been looking into the questions here, and I see that this is an issue. I think you shouldn't shy away from the issue of a situation that if we are going to implement the Green Deal, it means that we will have a deficit of wood of around 130 million cubic meters, in addition to what we have today. So the first question is what kind of negative effects will the full implementation of a Green Deal, or if I say that if we are looking at the forest carbon, if we are implementing that fully out, what will the socioeconomic effects be? It may be that you should put your efforts into something else instead of the forest carbon side, in order to avoid severe socioeconomic impacts. So that's one side of it. I think we are working too little with the trade-offs in this system, and that is what we have to illustrate. What are the trade-offs? What are the consequences? Secondly, if you're going into the bioeconomy in the way I see it, you are generating higher values, as Willem Jan said, and I liked that presentation a lot. And by that, you are using the fiber more efficient, and you are can be a situation that you're losing less wood. And that means that you have the possibility to store more carbon in the forest. Punkt.
Okay, thank you very much. And you already referred to some of the presentations and clearly gave very important messages for the next steps in our projects. But as final words, based on what you have seen or on your reflections, are there any last messages for carrying these projects forward, or also for the broad audience of this seminar before we hand over back to Fulvio?
Really have a holistic approach.
Yes, I think that's a very good conclusion. Also, again, reminding us of your long-term employer, the Institute for Systems Analysis, which we need to mainstream also here. So Professor Nielsen, thank you very much again for your participation throughout this seminar.
Thank you.
Okay, with this, Fulvio, for your conclusion.
Thank you, Peter. We are already over time, and thank you very much, all of you, for staying with us until the end. Still, we have 68 participants online, which is very good, especially because many places is already lunchtime this. So let's summarize this webinar. Today, we are at the second webinar of this series, and we'll have another webinar in the spring 2026. And the next webinar will be organized by the ForestPaths projects, of course, with the collaboration also of the other two projects, but the lead will be for ForestPaths. The webinar recording will be shared soon with you, so in the coming weeks. And please stay tuned on the project's social channels for more information about the project's developments. At the same time, I seen we had a lot of questions in the chat, and we didn't reply all of them. So we will also, together with Stan, try to reply to other questions which are in the Q&A section, and we will find a way to forward those replies to you. So thank you again for posting your interesting question, but now we are quite over time, and we will continue by email with this. So I would like to thank you all the three projects for their very valuable contribution to this webinar. And I would like to thank you, Stan, for his very great contribution to this. And thank you all for your attention. And I wish you a good continuation of your day, and see you in our next webinar in the spring 2026. Have you all a nice day, and bye-bye.